Hey guys, this is Camfrey15, joined by my uncle again. And like I said a few weeks ago, after the first round, we would do our second round predictions. Now, some of the obviously like two of the matchups have already started, so we'll continue and maybe talk a little bit about those games. But yeah, now that finally the Clippers Mavericks series finally finished up yesterday, we can now do our predictions for round two. Now, one of my other friends, Matt Stormstead, was supposed to be on here, but because of things going on in his personal life, he couldn't make it. But I do have some of the predictions he said. For the Hawks 76er series, he said Hawks in six. Bucks and Nets, he said if Harden is a go, he's got the Nets in six. If not, he actually says he has Bucks in seven. For the Clippers Jazz matchup, he has Clippers in five. And then for Nuggets and Suns, he has Suns in seven. So those are his predictions. I can't really tell you why he said those, but those are his things. Obviously, the most interesting one would be Clips in five. Even myself as a Clippers fan doesn't believe that. I have Clippers in six, but we'll get to that when that happens. But now that we got out of the first round, some first round recaps and reviews. I liked all the series. Obviously, the most probably, I guess, most entertaining series was Clippers versus Mavericks, even though I stressed out the entire series and I thought they were dead to rights done. But I would say that's the most entertaining series of this. But I thought it was a really good first round type of matchup stuff. The only, like, I guess, first round matchup that honestly could care like no less about was probably the Jazz versus the Grizzlies, because after Donovan Mitchell came back, that series was kind of over. 76ers and Wizards was somewhat interesting especially when Embiid went down, but 76ers took care of business there. An entertaining series was the Hawks versus the Knicks. I actually thought the Knicks would pull through, but Trae Young, like he did yesterday, he's just in utter dominance. Like, this guy's tearing up people. And he just shut those Knicks fans up and just sent them home. So much for calling for the Nets to come, because you guys can't even beat anybody. But what do we know? The Knicks are going to probably make one playoff appearance, then be back to being horrible again. Then we had Nets versus Celtics. Jason Tatum did the best he could to make it entertaining for a game by dropping 50. At least they got one. But other than that, I don't know what the hell's going on in Boston. Brad Stevens gets promoted. Danny Ainge just quits. And now they're looking for a new coach. The Lakers versus Suns series. Well, that was interesting to say the least. I thought the Lakers would somehow get out of it, but I'm guessing, well, injuries happen at the wrong time in the wrong place. But then again, their main guy didn't show up when they needed him to. And I just felt like the Suns just had too much for the Lakers to handle. So it was an interesting series there. Again, we already spoke on Clips. Grizzlies and Jazz. Next up was Portland and Nuggets. I didn't watch much of that series, but it was interesting. Obviously, probably the most, exciting game out of that series was the double overtime game where Damian Lillard scored like 50 points, but still lost. I don't know. Damian Lillard, to me, he's like that one player that gets all these points, but will still come out of a game with an L. And I just don't understand. They definitely need to get some help there. Otherwise, he might just need to just dip and leave. Although Terry Stotts have parted ways because of it. I don't know where Portland goes from there. I really don't. It's just confusing there. And then obviously probably the most exciting series that went the full 7 games was Clippers versus Mavericks. For an NBA fan perspective, that was a fun, exciting series. For a Clippers fan and even a Dallas Mavericks fan, that was probably one of the most stressful series you could have watched. But in the end, even though Luka Doncic was insane, Kawhi Leonard in the last 2 games just said, I'm not losing and I'm not going home. And the Clippers win it in 7 games as they move on to the second round. I very much enjoyed that series, and it's going to be a problem. But as for Dallas, I don't know what the hell's going on there. Like, if you go watch my game recap after that, I speak a little bit on what Dallas is going to do with the future. I don't know what they're going to do. Porzingis looks like he's going to be a straight up bust, and now this seems like they're going to be stuck for him because who wants him now? So yeah, what were your thoughts on the first round matchups?
Um, I the the Clippers Dallas series was pretty interesting. Um, Simply in the fact that only the game seven only had was the only game in which the home team won. I got to admit, I had never seen a series. Well, I mean, it was the first time, so obviously no one had, up to a point where all 6 games were won by the road team. So in that, I would probably say that was a pretty interesting series. Now, I did say that all the Clippers really had to do was just show some type of heart, some type of desire to want to beat Dallas, and they'll beat them. They really didn't show that desire, in my opinion, until game five. Even though they lost that game. Even though they lost that game, they showed some type of desire. And, you know, I saw a team going back to the locker room after that game five loss. And I said, oh, these guys are pretty ticked off. And you actually see a scene in which Kawhi Leonard is voicing his displeasure, which is rare, I think, for him. So after I saw that, I was like, you know what? I think the next 2 games will be pretty interesting. Yeah, the Clippers did pull it out because they really showed grit and desire to go ahead and win that series. Utah and Memphis, just like we said before, if Donovan Mitchell is there, they're going to win in the sweep or they're going to win in the gentleman's sweep game. So that happened. Philadelphia and the Wizards, I don't even think without Embiid, anyone actually thought that the Wizards were going to come back in that series. The Knicks and Hawks, that was a pretty interesting series. So to me, it came down in that series that it wasn't the Knicks defense that to me was a problem. They couldn't score.
Yeah.
They couldn't score at all. I mean, they were missing wide open shots. They were missing wide open layups. I mean, it's not like the Atlanta defense actually did anything innovative to stop them from scoring. They just couldn't score. They just, you know.
And Julius Randle was just awful. He was just awful.
Correct. They actually allowed him to drive into the lane. He drove into the lane, and he's missing wide open layups and floaters. Derrick Rose is missing layups and floaters. Nobody could hit a three to save their life. So it didn't shock me not one bit that with the way they played offensively, they were going to lose that series. Believe it or not, and this is going to sound really strange, but the most interesting series for me was the Bucks and Heat. Even though the Bucks swept them, I really wanted to see how the Bucks were going to respond, knowing that they have the tools in order to win a championship, going up against the team they lost to the prior year. And they totally dominated. And that was pretty interesting to see coming from the Bucks team, who historically, at least when Giannis has brought that team to a particular point in the season, that they would have actually played like this. So I was actually really, really impressed with Milwaukee moving forward. We also said the Nets and Celtics. We said that if Jason Tatum is good enough for them to get one game, but there is no way he's going to average 50 for an entire series, which is what he would have had to do in order for the Celtics to beat the Nets. Danny Ainge resigned, but the problem with the Celtics has always been Danny Ainge. He put that team together. He brought in the coach. So yeah, he should be made to be the fall guy for it. So they wasn't going to fire him because he's a beloved Celtic. So the best thing they can do is get him to bow out gracefully and move Brad Stevens up. So he had all of those draft picks and did very little to nothing with them. The city of Boston has some issues with trying to bring in free agents. So, you know, Boston is they're gonna. I think they're in some trouble. I really think they're in some trouble. I don't know if Jason Tatum, the Celtics currently constructed is not good enough to go any further than where they're going right now. So I just can't see it. So the first round was actually pretty good. The second round games got off pretty interesting as well too. So I can't really wait to dig into those.
Yeah. So let's get into obviously the four matchups in the second round. So we're gonna start off with the East Conference, and obviously it's gonna game two is gonna be taking place today, but it was the first game to start in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And that was the Milwaukee Bucks after sweeping the Heat, taking on the Brooklyn Nets after beating the Boston Celtics. And in game one, the Bucks fell to the Brooklyn Nets 115 to 107. The only big important caveat, though, is the fact that James Harden, within 13 seconds of the game,
43.
essentially,
They said it. Yeah, they said 43.
wow, oh, Jesus.
That's, yeah, 43 seconds into the game, he walked to the bench and couldn't do it.
Yeah, and it literally came out he had a right hamstring strain. Now, a few weeks ago, I said the Nets undoing or them losing a playoff series could be because of injuries happening at the wrong time. So hopefully, the Nets can get James Harden back. But my just thoughts on game one, I didn't see much of it, but I saw as much as I could. Um, I remember watching like at least somewhat of the first half, and it was relatively pretty close. And then when I had to go drive out somewhere, and then I came back home, I saw the Nets just up big, and I was like, "Oh, wow, this was crazy." Now, what I've heard is I heard Blake Griffin did a really good job alongside KD and Kyrie Irving.
He
Um,
did. He did. I got to admit, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that was the thing that impressed me most about the Nets. Blake Griffin played like he wanted a championship. This guy was diving on the floor for loose balls. He is trying to trying to force jumps. I mean, every time the ball was seemed to be in the air, Blake Griffin was around. I mean, he pretty much played a complete basketball game. And that's my one takeaway. If Blake Griffin does happen to play like this, they can probably afford not necessarily a bad game from KD and Kyrie Irving, because the Nets really can't afford a bad game from either one of those guys. But defensively, which is the issue with the Nets, defensively, they are a heck of a lot better basketball team. And yeah, they won that game on the defensive end, not the offensive end. And Blake Griffin was one to one. Blake Griffin and I forgot the young man's first name, but his last name is Claxton. Because of those two guys right there holding down the paint, trying to keep Lopez. I forgot his first name.
Brooke,
Brooke Lopez. They kept him at bay. But moving forward, I gotta miss without Harden.
yeah,
The Bucks, the Bucks can win that series. All they would have to do, to me, is continue to get attempts in the paint at the basket. Um, uh, Antetokounmpo was shooting threes. I mean, Holiday couldn't hit anything. Forbes, my goodness gracious. I mean, the only thing the ball touched when he was around was the floor, man. He couldn't hit anything. I mean,
yeah,
Connaughton threw up an air ball. Um, what's his name? He used to play for us in Chicago. Um, Bobby Portis, offensively, he couldn't get anything going. The Bucks really couldn't get anything going offensively, and you really couldn't tell if it was the Nets defense or the Bucks offense. But because they missed so many of those open shots that they took, especially in the third quarter, that's when you start to think that, you know what, the Bucks offense was just horrid. To me, it was just horrid. They just didn't they seemed out of sync all night.
Yeah. And then it doesn't also help in the fact that they also in that Heat series lost Dante DiVincenzo for
Correct.
the rest of the season.
Correct.
Um,
But I
so
don't think Harden's coming back out of it. I mean, I gotta admit, a hamstring is pretty difficult to try to maintain and get going in just 2 days,
yeah,
especially after you spent 20 plus games um, on the away from basketball because of the same injury, same leg. So, and then the first thing that happens is, yeah, I don't know if it popped or it just tweaked. I don't know, but that's going to be a real difficult injury for him to come back from in this series. So I gotta admit, I honestly would be shocked if Harden does come back, and if he does come back, I would be absolutely shocked if he's 100% James Harden.
yeah, that's gonna be the one thing every game that's gonna be asked is when is Harden gonna be available? Is he gonna be available? And this definitely now throws a whole wrench into what the original predictions for this series could be. Now, because the whole Harden aspect is in the way, honestly, I feel like depending on what the Bucks can do, they can make this a 7 game series. I feel like this can be a 7 game series either way. In my opinion. Again, it comes strictly down to the James Harden injury and his availability. And if the Bucks want to make this a 7 game series, they got to start tonight. I don't believe they can do what the Clippers did and let the Nets go up 2-0 on these guys and then get 2 games on their home court. I feel like tonight the Bucks are going to have to win game 2 to tie up the series. And we're going to see if the Bucks do anything different, especially if their players are going to hit their shots more efficiently. They're definitely going to have to slow down to the best of their abilities one of the scorers in Kyrie or KD, and then make sure the other players are limited to what they're doing. But it's going to be very interesting to see tonight what the Bucks do compared to what they did in game 1. But I would not be shocked if the Bucks come out of tonight's game winning. But for me, this is a toss-up. But if I'm going to be honest, I'm going with Nets in 7.
Nets in 7. Okay. Well, to me, when the home team wins, to me, I tend to think that you really shouldn't get too stressed out because the home team winning in the playoffs is something that the home team is supposed to do. The only thing you have to do, even if the Bucks go down 0-2, they have to go home and respond. It's just that they have to go home to respond. The phrase is, it's not a series until a road team wins. So the Bucks can make it a series tonight, but if they don't, it's not out of the realm of possibility. They can't go to Milwaukee and win their 2 home games and go back to Brooklyn for game 5. So it's not dire straits just yet. So but without James Harden, yes, I do like the Nets in 7. I mean the Bucks in 7.
Okay.
I'll say that because I gotta admit, if the Bucks offense comes together, then defensively they have enough tools to be able to limit Durant and Irving. But if one of those guys goes clean off, that's what they have to avoid. They just have to avoid one of those 2 guys going clean the heck off. But without Harden, I think offensively the Bucks can keep up, and they probably will. So no Harden, I'll go with the Bucks.
Okay.
7.
Yeah. So we'll see what the Harden injury is there. I feel like if the series goes long enough, Harden might be able to come back maybe around a game 5 or 6. But again, there's no guarantees with these hamstring issues. They could keep you out for a long time. So we'll see if that's going to end up being the Nets' downfall because this injury stuff. Now, the other matchup that took place yesterday was the Hawks versus the 76ers in a game that was, when I was watching it, as I'm getting ready to watch the Clippers game, the Hawks dominated essentially the entire first half. And they were like, at one point, they were up like 37 to like 60 something. And I was like, my God, is this what I'm seeing right here? Is my predictions, is my fandom as a Clipper fan seeing Doc Rivers fail yet again, coming back, and this time it's affecting the 76ers? That would be a life dream for me. Honestly, I need it to happen. So Hawks, please do this. But I'm seeing 76ers get ran out of the building. Trae Young is shooting from the damn logo, making shots, and he's essentially replicating what he did against the Knicks. And Bogdanovich, and Gallinari, Lou Williams.
Atlanta can shoot the basketball.
Herter, Collins. It's just so many weapons, and I'm just like, bruh. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. They're literally going to Philadelphia right now, kicking these guys' tails around. Now, that's when Philadelphia coming out of the half tried to make it a game, especially at the end, which. Honestly, I don't know what the hell happened at the end. It was just you just see it to the point like, okay, after Collins gets the one crazy alley-oop dunk over Embiid, I'm like, you're just thinking, okay, it's gonna be game over. Hawks are gonna coast to an easy victory. But then these 76ers go on a little mini run with like seconds left to go in the game and almost make this a game and almost tie it and sending it to overtime. And the final score was 128 to 124. Now, that was a little bit too late of a push by the 76ers. Maybe they had got some stops early in the game. They would have came back and won. But from what I've been hearing, the most important thing about this series is the fact that the whole who's going to be guarding Trae Young. Now, they tried Danny Green on Trae Young, and that didn't work for them. And I don't know why they don't want to go to Ben Simmons, but that's going to be an interesting thing. I also did hear Embiid had a particularly really good game. So you probably don't want to waste his games when this dude's literally on a torn meniscus. Trust me, I know how that feels. But I think the Hawks did something. Even if they lose game 2 tomorrow, they got home. They took at least a game from Philadelphia. And the thing about Philadelphia is how are they going into their game 2 prep? How are they going to guard, obviously, the many threats? Because, yes, you can try to limit what Trae Young does. But the thing is, when Trae Young can get the ball out of his hand and start passing all over the place, you got shooters all over the place where, guess what? You got, Bogdanovich in the corner, Herter, Collins or Cabela that could get lobs and stuff like that. It's just insane with how much talent Atlanta's got. And you compare freaking Trae and Luka with what they've been doing. They have had crazy playoff runs. Philadelphia is definitely going to have to do a better job at slowing down the role players as well as trying to slow down Trae Young. So whether they try to trap him or do something, I don't know. The only question for 76ers fans that I'm going to tell you guys as a Clipper fan is if Doc Rivers is going to make the necessary adjustments. That's my only thing that I'm going to take away from this series. Is Doc Rivers going to make the necessary adjustments to put his team in position to win? Like I heard, in the game, he played a dominant bench lineup for far too long, which got Atlanta out to that big lead that they had. So I don't know. Listen, I've seen Doc Rivers. He does some crazy stuff. But am I going to be wondering if he's going to make adjustments? No. And until I see him do it, then you won't lead me to believe that he will do it. I feel like he'll play the same guys, the same exact way, have Danny Green guarding Trae Young yet again, and we'll see. Will Doc Rivers makes the adjustments? That's the only thing the 76ers fans I got to tell you. You want that adjustment, it's probably not going to happen if Doc Rivers is under the watch. But I think my prediction for game 2 is if the Hawks are managed to take another game from Philadelphia, I think the 76ers are actually going to be in some trouble there.
Well, you want to talk about adjustments. I'll tell you what the adjustment was. In the first half, the Atlanta Hawks scored 74 points. And against this current Philadelphia roster, that is unheard of. This team, as good defensively as they are, to give up 74 points in one half. What happened was that they realized, based on how they played the second half, that Atlanta is a right-handed ball club. Everything they do dribble drive right, dribble drive right, dribble drive right, everything. So what they did, they forced Trae Young left. They forced him left. Then at that particular point, they also, when he passed the ball, they made sure he didn't get it back. Made someone else try to make some scores. Now, yes, Atlanta's shooting kept them in the ball game in the second half. However, that was the major adjustment. They made them work from the left side of the court instead of the right side of the court. And yeah, they almost won that game. Atlanta should feel very lucky because now Doc Rivers did make his adjustment, and that's what it was. Make them score on the left side of the basketball and stop Trae Young from trying to force feed the ball to the right side. Oh, yeah, they still scored, but at the same time, it was so much more difficult because Atlanta is not used to working from the left side of the basketball court. That whole team is a predominantly right-handed ball club, and Trae Young is good. But once he beat and stepped into the threshold somewhere on the right side, he got trapped, and he got trapped hard by bigger, stronger players. And yeah, there were some times in which, yeah, he couldn't get out of it. But then again, there was sometimes he saw it and then passed out of it. So I think that Philadelphia is not as much trouble as people seem to think that they are. However, the intensity that they had in the second half, if they show that intensity in the first half of the next game, then yeah, I honestly think Philadelphia will blow them out. I think they'll blow them out. But again, it just depends on, and again, you are right, but only with Doc Rivers, but you are right in the sense that he has got to get these guys motivated to put these guys away. You got to be motivated to put these guys away. When he motivated them to actually trim that lead down, they put so much energy into trimming the lead down. I just don't think they had enough energy to put them away. So yeah. I still like Philadelphia in this series. I still like Philadelphia to win the East. So, and it's not because of Doc Rivers. I think if Embiid is 100%, then yeah, with the tools that Philadelphia has around Embiid, they should win the East. So I still like Philadelphia. I'll pick Philadelphia to win game 2. I'll pick Philadelphia to win this series. And I'll probably say, I'm not going to go 7. I'll say Philadelphia should be able to put these guys away in 6.
Yeah, I would go with 6 games too. Again, just like the Harden stuff, we're gonna have to watch that Embiid injury because he's
correct. Now that's provided that Embiid is healthy.
Yeah.
If Embiid plays all 6 games and he's healthy and he plays the rest of the series like he did game 1, because I think that first half is just an anomaly of how Philadelphia is going to play. I can't see Philadelphia in any other game this year give up 74 points in one half, give up 23 pointers in an entire game. I can't see that. And then on the other hand, they didn't hit as many threes. And now, granted, Ben Simmons played spectacular, but they were horrid from the 3-point strike. So I can't see them giving up that many threes again in the series. And I can't see them giving up that many points in the first half as well, in any half, mind you. I think Atlanta woke them up. So yeah. I'll still say Philadelphia in 6. And yeah, we'll move on from there.
Okay. So now we go from the Eastern Conference to the Western Conference. And the first matchup we're going to talk about is the Denver Nuggets versus the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, the Phoenix Suns, I guess you can call what they pulled an upset over the Lakers. I personally didn't see that as an upset. I think it was just a manhandling.
Me either.
But the Nuggets, they managed to beat Portland like they did. And this is going to be a very interesting series. Obviously, the one important thing, since we're talking about health, because almost every series, at least one team has a health issue, is the health of Chris Paul. in the series from what he got last round. Now they did get a little bit of rest in preparation, but I personally have the Suns in this series. I have the Suns in 6 games. Now I think if the Suns are firing on all cylinders and they play just as well as they did against the Lakers, like they do against the Denver Nuggets, they'll be able to beat these guys in at least 6 games. Now, I feel like Denver's going to have a much tougher defense than the Lakers did. And obviously, the one important thing the Suns are going to have to do is game plan around Jokic. But from what I've heard, DeAndre Ayton has done a pretty solid job against Jokic. It's like to the point he slows him down, not like stop him completely, but slows him down. Devin Booker's going to have to be spectacular again, like he was in the first round. And then the role players are just going to have to do that. Like, for example, Jay Crowder, even though he did show up in the last closeout game, he can't be horrible for the entire series because that could have been maybe one of the reasons the Lakers somehow won the series. And I don't think this time the Suns can count on injuries to happen because if Jokic goes in that mode where he's just going to take over, especially along with Michael Porter Jr. If Michael Porter Jr. starts going off too, that's a very tough team to beat. And then I think an X factor is actually Austin Rivers. I didn't see, like I said, much of the Trailblazers Nuggets series, but I did hear Austin Rivers was actually doing really good, and he was actually shutting the door a few times on the Trailblazers. I think that's going to be the X factor for the series as a whole is how Austin Rivers does. If he plays really good, I think they can do it. Now, I have Suns. I would not be shocked if the Nuggets could pull the upset, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I feel like the Suns are a more complete team than the Nuggets, but the Nuggets, I feel if Mike Malone, they'll give the Suns a pretty good test, but I got Suns in 6.
I don't. I like Denver. And a couple things about the reason why I like Denver is when the Suns played the Lakers, when Anthony Davis was 100%, they couldn't stop him. I don't care who was in front of him. That's Jokic. It's the same thing. That's Jokic. Jokic is so polished and so experienced. The Nuggets are so well coached. They've been in this position for the last 2-3 years, climbing. And we all thought that Jamal Murray's injury was going to hurt them. And you said you think Austin Rivers is the X factor. Me personally, I think it's Monty Morris. That kid is playing lights out basketball. He is much taken over where Jamal Murray left off. And he is playing some fantastic basketball. Defensively, they are a very good basketball team. Now, granted, they were playing Portland. Portland's defense is horrid, and that stems from the culture that Terry Stotts created. If anything, they need a coach to come up in there and create a culture of defense, which is something Portland just does not play. They just don't play it. They need a shakeup, and I think, Damian Lillard, as good as he is, defensively, he's a little guy. He's a small guard. And it's really difficult to try to take on these bigger guards when, you're not of the same size as they are. He tries to do as much as he possibly can. But unfortunately, because of who he is and how he plays, he can't expel the majority of his energy on both ends of the court. And he just won't have enough energy to close games out like he normally does in Portland. But they got to get someone to change the culture in Portland because it ain't working. The same thing that happened right now is the same thing when they had Rick Adelman back in the early 90s. They had no culture of defense. All they wanted to do was rip and run up and down the court, dunking, shooting threes, and things of that nature, but they got no chips to show for it. So to me, that's what they need. They need a shake up. They need someone that's going to come up in there and even if you do get an offensive minded coach, bring in a defensive, bring in someone that's going to, an assistant that's going to shake up that defense. But back to the series, I still like Denver. Denver is much more experienced than what Phoenix is. Chris Paul is a great basketball player, and he does heighten the level of play of all that's around him. But I gotta admit, man, Jokic is something else. I mean, that kid is something else. I don't think, and DeAndre Ayton is really their only big. If Ayton's in foul trouble, Phoenix is in trouble. So, and the 2 games that the Suns lost to the Lakers, AD balled out. So I don't think that Jokic is getting hurt this series. And considering Jokic won't get hurt this series, I honestly think Denver will move on to the Western Conference Finals. But I'll say 6 because I don't think they're going to want to go to Phoenix for a game 7.
Yeah.
So I'll say 6.
Okay, so then after that series, the last series we're going to be talking about on the video is going to be Clippers versus the Utah Jazz. Obviously, the Clippers coming off that exciting series against the Dallas Mavericks. And if you want to get my real hard fact thoughts on that series, I'm going to be making a series preview later today. So the thing about this series is going to be very interesting. I feel like these 2 teams essentially are like a mirror of each other. They like to shoot threes a lot. That's essentially their offense. And their defenses, obviously the Clippers defense, if they can lock down and play legit defense, they are one of the best defensive teams. But Utah is one of the best defensive teams in the league thanks to Rudy Gobert. Now, my prediction is I have actually Clippers in 6. The reason why I have them is I feel like their shooting can be more sustainable than Utah. Not to say that Utah is not a good shooting team. Any of these teams can get hot and go on a big run. I just feel like this series is going to come down to who's going to have the better shooting percentage from the field, from whether it's 3 or 2. Whatever, and then when a team's going to need a stop, who's going to get that stop, and then the rebounding is going to be very important. One thing is the Clippers, I feel like they can go a little bit into the small ball lineup because a few matchups in the regular season against the Jazz, it has worked, but they, again, like I said, risk the chances of rebounding. So I think for the Clippers perspective, they're going to change things altogether. And even in terms of the defense, it's not going to, I feel like the defense is still going to be obviously centered around trying to slow down Donovan Mitchell, but not to the point where they actually had to like actively trap him. I think they can go one-on-one with Mitchell unless he absolutely is just dominating. But I feel like in terms of rotation-wise, they're going to have to change things up. So that's a Ty Lue thing. Now, as for the Jazz, obviously they're going to have to play, obviously, they're the same aggressive defense they did against the Memphis Grizzlies and locked down. Obviously, they're going to have that crowd behind them. And Donovan Mitchell, he's going to have to be superstar Donovan Mitchell. The other guys are going to have to show up and hit shots like Joe Ingles, Bogdanovich. I know Mike Conley, I know when he sees the Clippers, he just smells blood because he loves playing them from his Memphis days. So it's going to be a very interesting series to watch. It's really going to come down to me that who's going to shoot better. And to me, I feel like each team matches up with each other pretty well. I just feel, in my opinion, even though I'm a Clippers fan, I feel like the Clippers match up much better than they do with Utah than they did with Dallas. And I have Clippers in 6. And then 2, the reason why, from what I saw from this past series, I feel like they can take a game in Utah. Now, I don't believe they're going to win game 1 because just the mentally draining and the fatigue from game 7. But I will be shocked if they do go into game 1 and win that. But we'll see. We'll see if the Clippers can get out of their own way in their franchise roadblock of the famous 2 words of second round. But that's are my thoughts. I got Clips in 6.
Um, I like the Clippers too. The problem with the Clippers, though, is that short turnaround from Game 7 to Game 1. Now, Utah, I don't think it'll be a week.
Yeah, a week.
A
At
week.
least a week.
Right, at least a week. So the Clippers can get Game 1. And I honestly think they should really work to get Game 1. That's the game for them to get. Because the Utah Jazz may be coming in with a little rust. They played, to me, an inferior opponent. Then on top of that, the mentality coming in playing a team with a reputation historically like the Clippers. You're coming into, their mindset could be, oh shoot, man, we're playing the Clippers, man. This Game 1 is a wrap. They're gonna be tired. They're gonna be mentally worn out. Ty Lue is not gonna have them prepared. You want them to think those kind of things. So I honestly think the game for the Clippers to get is Game 1. They can match up with Utah. That lineup that they threw out against Dallas. Let's see, it was Morris, Leonard, George, Batum, and Jackson is where they started. And they switched on defense a lot. So then that way, when you run pick and roll, you still got a long, lengthy defender in front of you, no matter who you got. So you don't really fear Gobert offensively. You just got to keep him off the glass. So honestly, I like the Clippers. If they get Game 1, I think the Clippers can end that series in 6. I can't see the Clippers losing Game 1 and then pulling off 4 of the next 5. I can't see that. So the game to get is Game 1. And I'm hoping that Ty Lue actually stresses that to them. But if they don't get Game 1, then Game 7 is attainable. I just don't know if they'll want to go back to Utah with that fan base to play a game.
Yeah.
Back when you were younger, back when the Bulls in 97 and 98, I can tell you just by watching television, man, that building is something, it's a different animal when you have to go into that building in the playoffs and try to win a basketball game. And luckily for the Clippers, they got a guy who can shun all of that out and perform. So as we did back when we went to Utah with the Bulls. So I do like the Clippers. I'll say 6 because I do believe the Clippers will get Game 1. They will get Game 1. So I think the Clippers will move on to play Denver in the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, and I guess the one promising thing the Clippers and their fans can look forward to is they did win 3 games in a pretty hostile Dallas environment. So obviously I do in my heart of heart believe they can take 1 game. And then another thing is the Jazz definitely have to hope that Kawhi Leonard just doesn't become what he has, and he has that, like, say, that Game 5 off game. Right. I believe the Clippers go as far as Kawhi Leonard takes them. And if Kawhi Leonard isn't on, then I need Paul George to be like, okay, I got to carry you on the back.
Well, let me cut you off real quick. I personally, and again, Paul George has received a lot of criticism for his playoff history. But in the last 3 games, especially that Game 6 specifically, that's the one I want to talk about. Because in Game 5, he 23, 10, and 6. They lost the game, but Paul George still contributed to what could have been a Clippers win. But that Game 6, he was off offensively. He couldn't buy a bucket, but he didn't stress. he decided, okay, well, since I can't do things offensively, I'm going to defend and rebound, and Kawhi picked me up. This guy, again, diving on the floor for loose balls. He's finding ways to get to the basket, pass the ball, find guys who are open, and rebound the basketball. He had double-digit rebounds again in game 6. So this guy is actually playing some really good, solid basketball. It's just a matter of the whole team concept of shooting all of these darn threes when you really don't need to. I mean, if you make a really great defensive play on the other end and go back down on offense and chuck up a three from 25 feet, then what good was the defensive play that you did prior? I mean, they have to really think. And it sometimes just seems like they're playing hero ball. But the last 3 games, I think game 5, the latter part of game 5, the latter part of game 5, 6 and 7, they stopped that hero ball crap and just started playing together. So I want to give Paul George a big shout out and just say, hey, the guy's playing, but again, just don't turn into George Paul.
Yeah.
Please don't turn into George Paul. Please, just whatever you do, be Paul George, play basketball, do what your team necessarily needs you to win. Don't try to be a hero. Just play ball. And I think the Clippers will win this 7. I'm gonna still say 6.
Yeah. I thought, in my opinion, Paul George, he wasn't efficient enough offensively in the last 3 games of the series, but he did enough to contribute to the team. I mean, the whole thing about chucking up threes, the same could be said for, the Utah Jazz, because sometimes when I watch some Jazz games, it would go down and just chuck up a three, and it would just negate a really good defensive thing. I also do think an X factor for the Clippers definitely could be a Terrence Mann. Hopefully he gets more minutes. But at the same time, too, another X factor for the Jazz could definitely be Jordan Clarkson. But at the same time, I feel like the Clippers would live with whatever Jordan Clarkson does, because sometimes he can just go on cold spells.
Yeah, see, that's just it. He comes in and he has the green light to shoot whatever shot he wants. And if he's on, Utah they're gone. But if he's off, then it could be make or miss with Jordan Clarkson. I personally would not want to put my playoff life in the hand of Jordan Clarkson.
Yeah.
And I think moving forward, that's going to be the issue with Utah. If Mitchell has a bad game, can you truly lean on Jordan Clarkson to do what's necessary to win basketball games? I say no. I mean, I think it's going to come down to who do you trust more. Do you trust Donovan Mitchell or do you trust Kawhi Leonard? Me personally, I'm going to trust Kawhi Leonard. And Clippers in 6, man.
Yeah. It's gonna be a very fun, interesting series to watch. I also do believe the Clippers have a good chance, because there was a few times in that Memphis series with the Jazz, sometimes their defense just gave up big leads. I think it was the game 3 or game 4 that Utah was up big, but then Memphis almost came roaring back to win the game.
Correct.
So that could be another thing. But as for that, I'm gonna make a video Clippers Jazz. If you guys want to get my thoughts and my in-depths and stuff like that, I can go more in depth with that. But if you guys like this video, leave a like, put in the comment section your thoughts on all the series and what's your predictions for all of them, as well as hit the subscribe button if you want to get more NBA content, as well as more Clipper content if you want to follow me for my Clipper stuff. Other than that, I'm gonna get out of here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and we will be back whenever the second round's done for the Western Conference Finals, both West Conference Finals playoff series, and then obviously the Finals series, and then that will be it. So other than that, that's kind of it. So we're gonna get out of here. So till then, guys, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day or night whenever you're checking out this video. Till then, guys, we'll see you guys in the next video. See you guys in the next video. Peace.
Later.